If you had to sort of encapsulate the warning that you're communicating to people into a sentence, what would that warning be?
Don't believe everything you see on a container, a bottle, or a product that you're buying.
Why? What's the consequence?
Is that if you're believing in the marketing and what you see on the front of the label, instead of actually reading the ingredients, you could be exposing yourself to toxins that you probably don't want to be.
And what mission are you on, Yvonne?
Well, I'm on a mission to empower people to avoid environmental toxins so they can protect their families and really using science and evidence to make informed decisions that affect their health.
And what is the macro picture here? When you think about the world we're living in and how exposed we are to toxins, do you think people are at all aware of the toxins that we're consuming every day?
I think now people are becoming more aware, but there are new toxins that are emerging every day, and it's simply a consequence of how the system is set up. And it's mainly because chemicals and products are not required to be tested for safety before they're released onto the market, at least in the US and many other regions of the world. And so what happens is people are buying these products and we're being exposed to chemicals that we have no idea how they're actually impacting our health, if they're harmful or not. And we're basically guinea pigs in a massive human experiment that no one signed up for, that we didn't consent to.
And what's the risk?
Well, the risk is that we go about our daily lives not knowing what we're consuming or being exposed to, and then later on in life, unfortunately, fall ill and suffer from some chronic disease.
Are there particular illnesses that are most closely associated with toxins in our environment and toxins that we're consuming every day?
Yes. So cancer is probably one of the most clear associations, as well as infertility. And more widely known are issues like not being able to conceive, having a decrease in sperm count, sperm quality, and the fact that sperm count has declined by 50% in the last 50 years is pretty alarming.
And who are you?
I'm a toxicologist, but I'm also a mom.
What's a toxicologist?
So I study the basic science of poisons. How do chemicals interact with the cells in our bodies and how do they cause harm? But not only that, how do our cells defend themselves against these toxins?
Why did you choose to do toxicology? You know, you could have done anything with your life. You could have pursued anything.
I found it by accident. Was it really an accident, though? I don't know. I think I was led there. I think I've always been interested. I think I was meant to share this. And I think it brings up a lot of emotions for me because I've been personally impacted, but I think of how many millions of people around the world are struggling and don't know why. And so if I can bring awareness to that, then I feel like my mission is complete. But I studied toxicology because just in my body, I knew that something was amiss. We need to study this environment around us. We need to be more aware and more conscious of what we're doing. And when I was an undergrad and I discovered toxicology, I was living the absolute conventional lifestyle and sick all the time and wondering why and just thinking that it was normal and I shrugged it off. And it wasn't normal. And I reversed it.
It's so personal for you, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Why?
Not only because I've been personally impacted, but I want my children to have the best version of me so I can look after them and so that I don't have to worry about them having some of the problems that I had.
And you're scared about that?
I'm concerned, and I take action on it every single day. I think about it all the time, but not in a scared way. Just what else can I do? What else can I research? What else can I learn? How else can I implement this? And how else can I share this so that other people can implement it? Because there's so much going on in the scientific community about these toxic chemicals that the general public doesn't know. And we all have a right to know.
Have we got any tissues, Joe?
Thank you. Didn't expect to cry.
Yeah, I can understand, but it's illuminating because it really shows why you're doing what you're doing and how much it means to you, which I think is really important. And it makes a lot of things make sense, frankly. But it also, I haven't had kids yet, so I don't have that lens that I guess comes with being a parent and that concern of, I think about myself and I'm fairly young, so but I can imagine in a world where I had kids, I'd become ultra cautious and ultra thoughtful.
Yeah, especially coming from where I came from, where I had those problems. And just to think, if I can prevent that in my children and help people prevent that in their children, then that's the best outcome for everyone. I actually did never pay attention to toxins before. I studied toxicology. I was in the lab. I was looking at really toxic chemicals, chemicals that we know cause harm and cause cancer. But as I went on with my life, I started to face more and more increasing health issues, increasing in severity, until I was faced with fertility challenges. And I was unable and unwilling to accept at the time that IVF, or in vitro fertilization, would be my only option if I wanted to have a family. And I was unwilling to accept that because I said, wait a second, I know that there's an environmental component to this. There's chemicals in our environment that are impacting my fertility. That's what I studied in the lab. I studied fertility and cancer. So it was quite shocking to me that I actually started to struggle with some of these conditions, but no one could give me answers. And what was missing from my view at the time was these low-dose chronic exposures over a lifetime to toxins and chemicals in our products, in our homes, in our outside world, that nobody really has connected to some of these disease states. And so it wasn't until I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and research that I started to uncover the linkages between these low-dose environmental chemicals in products that we're using all the time and how they impacted my health. And when I started to remove them and replace them with safer options, my health returned. My health recovered, and I was actually able to conceive my own children without assistance.
How old were you when you were first told that IVF was the only route?
I was 32.
Okay. And you'd had tests done and stuff, and at that time to see if you were, your sort of fertility levels and things like that?
Right. I was actually not having a cycle at that point for 9 months.
You didn't have a period at all?
I didn't have a period. So that is quite striking, because as a person in their 30s, people don't go through menopause and have, a lack of a period until sometimes 50 years old. That's almost 20 years earlier than that. That was really shocking to me. Something was clearly wrong. My body was screaming for help, and I had no other option but to take matters into my own hands.
As a toxicologist, someone who's trained and done the research, when you were told that, IVF is the only route, what did they say was the problem? Because if someone's telling you that IVF is the only route, presumably they're saying that you're maybe implying between the lines that you're broken in some way, or that it's normal not to have a period at 32. Like, what does the system tell you is the problem with you?
That's the issue, is that they didn't. They had no answers. They couldn't tell me what the issues were. They said, oh, you look normal in tests, but if you're unable to get pregnant on your own, well, the other option is IVF or adopt.
And as a toxicologist, was there anything that you needed to relearn or re-understand based on your training that you've discovered wasn't true?
I had to relearn almost everything, because as a scientist, I was trained as a toxicologist, day one, to follow the path and the belief that the dose makes the poison, that the more you're exposed to a chemical, the more severe the outcome. And that's not always true, because as we know now, there are chemicals in the environment known as endocrine disruptors at very low levels have higher activity than they do at high levels. So it's completely backwards. So I had to relearn everything that I had learned as a student in order to recover. And in fact, I was so resistant and so hesitant to go outside of what I knew that actually kept me stuck for much longer than I needed to be.
Did you say with endocrine disruptors that sometimes lower doses are worse than higher doses?
Exactly.
How can that be possible?
They're called non-monotonic dose responses. That's the technical term for it. But it's basically because the hormones in our bodies are present and active at such extraordinarily tiny amounts that any amount of excess or chemicals coming from the environment could trigger those same pathways, could be devastating on a cellular level.
And when you think about the products that we use day to day, whether they're beauty products or, might be a frying pan or a spatula, plastic spatula or anything, how many of these sort of day-to-day consumer products have toxic chemicals in them, or at least one toxic chemical?
Almost everything. And it might shock you to think that it is almost everything, but unfortunately it is. It's because our world now is overcome with plastics, single-use plastics, plastic containers, food containers. Almost everything that we know of has some plastic element to it. And that's really at the root of a lot of the problems that we have, because the chemicals that are used to create the plastics are leaching. The plastics themselves are breaking up, leading to microplastic and nanoplastic release that we are just being constantly bombarded with on a daily basis.
And what about beauty products? Because I had this conversation with my partner recently. So we're in the process now. I'm 32 years old. So it's that kind of season of life where you start thinking about having a family and kids and such. And so we've both become pretty conscious of the products that we're applying every day, from shampoos to deodorants.
For the most part, if you grab a product off of a store shelf, 9 times out of 10, there are chemicals of concern in them. And we're talking about major retailers, big box stores. If you go to smaller, let's say health food stores and chains like that, then the percentage is much lower. So you have a better chance of getting a safer product at a health food store.
And before we get into it, can you give me an overview of your personal education and the career journey you've traveled that have resulted in the wisdom that you have now?
Yes, so I am a PhD toxicologist. I started studying reproductive toxicity in the laboratory as an undergrad, and we were looking at the effect of environmental chemicals that are pretty much everywhere in the environment. They're the products of combustion. So the combustion of gasoline in cars, in cigarettes, in cooking. So some of these chemicals, and we looked at the impact of them on the reproductive system in males and females. And what we saw was pretty striking, such that when the animals are challenged with these chemicals and they're pregnant, then the offspring, not only the daughters and the sons, but also the grandchildren are impacted by the grandmother being exposed.
How does that work?
So when a woman is pregnant with a female daughter, her developing ovaries, which will then someday contain the eggs that will then become the grandchildren, are also in the same environment as the mother. So what the mother is being exposed to, the baby is also being exposed to, and also her grandchildren are being exposed.
So if a mother is exposed to toxins, her baby's babies are being exposed to those toxins.
That's exactly right.
So there's sort of a generational toxification of people.
Yeah, that's called multi-generational toxicity. And it even goes a step further, transgenerational. That's when great-grandchildren can be impacted, because what's happening in utero is epigenetic changes, so changes to our DNA that are then being passed down through our progeny. So great-grandchildren, even if they live a perfectly clean lifestyle and haven't been exposed to toxins, could have already been genetically predisposed to developing some of these conditions.